Although they can sometimes creep people out a little, rats are a very popular and friendly pet in the modern world. While I personally find rats like Turtle here of Rat Emporium Toronto to be especially adorable rodents, historically they were oftentimes the unfortunate bearers of inaccurate and negative depictions. Most notably, the black rat until recently bore much of the blame for spreading the medieval Black Death throughout Europe. Given this nefarious position, it should come as no surprise that rats inevitably played significant, if typically dark, roles in many pre-modern legends. Hey?
Perhaps the oldest and most historic of these stories about rats comes from the tale of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, a tale about a rat catcher with the ability to lead these pests away from cities and towns thanks to his enchanted pipe. So, in case it wasn't already evident, today's video will deal with, you guessed it, the legend of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. A tale that at first glance might appear somewhat bland, but is in fact very dark once heard in its entirety. As such, I will recount the story of the Pied Piper before spending some time analyzing it in greater detail, to see if there ever truly existed a person as sinister as the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Though there exist many versions of the tale, the general story goes as follows. In 1284, the small German town of Hamelin was suffering from a rat infestation so great that the town council, along with the mayor, met to discuss the sad state of affairs in the area. As they lamented their inability to deal with their predicament, a piper dressed in multicolored clothing appeared, claiming to be a rat catcher. As he advanced to the council table, he spoke.
Ich bin der wohlbekannte Sänger, der vielgereiste Rattenfänger, den diese altberühmte Stadt gewiss besonders nötig hat. Und wären's Ratten noch so viele und wären Wiesel mit dem Spiele, von allen säubrig diesen Ort, sie müssen miteinander fort.
Though his claim was a strange, if altogether unbelievable one, the mayor, in his desperation, decidedly swore to pay the piper the sum of 1,000 guilders if he could indeed remove all the rats successfully. Gleefully, the piper went out into the streets of Hamelin, brought his pipe to his lips, and began to blow into the magical instrument. As his eyes twinkled, 3 shrill notes emerged from his pipe, and suddenly a rumbling was heard. Rats of all shapes, sizes, and colors emerged from the many houses of the town and approached the piper, following him as he began to march away from the city and headed towards the nearby Weser River. Upon reaching the stream, every rat of Hamelin jumped into the body of water, where all but one drowned. Despite the piper maintaining his end of the bargain, and the people of Hamelin being overjoyed at their purified town, the mayor reneged on his promise and refused to pay him the full sum of money owed to the Pied Piper, even going so far as to insinuate that the town's savior brought the rats himself to the settlement in an attempted extortion. Angrily, the piper left town, but not before making a thinly veiled threat.
Bin ich gleich nur einer, und ihr mit vielen, reizt fürde ihr noch meine Leidenschaft, so will ich euch solch ein Stücklein spielen, das Herzeleid euch und Jammer schafft.
Though the town stood quiet for some time, everything changed on St. John and Paul's Day. While the inhabitants of Hamelin were in church, the Pied Piper returned to the city, dressed in green like a hunter. As he stood in the town, he raised his pipe and began to play the magical instrument. This time, instead of rats emerging from every building to follow him, the town's 130 children showed themselves and followed the musician's spell as he marched them out of the town. The children followed the piper through the wilderness until they finally reached a cave. Then, every one of them entered the strange grotto, a place from which they would never emerge. With Hamelin's children taken from them in the blink of an eye, the people of the town would never forget the wicked penalty they paid for having deceived the Pied Piper. With the story presented to you, it might be easy to dismiss the Pied Piper as a mere fantasy tale, but there are certain aspects of the myth that make it at the very least symbolically significant to events at the time and to German folklore as a whole, reappearing later on in the works of Wolfgang von Goethe, the Brothers Grimm, Robert Browning, as well as contemporary TV shows and films. And so I think this is the perfect time to analyze the legend of the Pied Piper in greater depth and the history of its existence. The earliest mention of the story seems to have actually existed on a stained glass window placed in the church of Hamelin around 1300 AD, in memory of the tragedy, some 15 years after the event is said to have occurred. Though this window was apparently destroyed in 1660, there are many accounts from between the 14th and 17th century describing it. The following image is in fact a reconstruction of the window by Hans Dobbertin, based on the surviving descriptions of the original. As you can see, the window details the colorful figure of the Pied Piper and several children dressed in white, and is generally acknowledged to have been created in memory of a, quote, tragically historical event for the town. In fact, it seems that the earliest written record about the town of Hamelin comes from the town chronicles themselves, in an entry from 1384, which chillingly states, quote, "It is 100 years since our children left." Evidently, the records show that something tragic inevitably occurred in Hamelin, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. The oldest surviving detailed account of the legendary tragedy is dated from the mid-15th century, in documents known as the Lunenburg manuscript. This account specifically presents the noteworthy date of June 26, 1284, yes, St. John and St. Paul's Day, as the time when the children of Hamelin were lured away by the Pied Piper. Despite this, there is one shocking thing missing from this and the other early documents of the tragedy. The clue itself lies in the first image of the event. Can you guess what it is? If you guess that there are no rats represented, then you are in fact correct. The presence of rats is entirely omitted from all early accounts of the Pied Piper. The rats, in fact, only make their way into the legend in the later half of the 1500s. What could this possibly mean? Did the rats, as they so often do, become involuntary culprits in the legend of the Pied Piper? Why did the Pied Piper then steal the children of Hamelin? There are many theories which seek to explain who the Pied Piper is, what he means, and if he was ever even real. The first of these suggests that the children of Hamelin likely died of natural causes, probably diseases or starvation, and that the Piper was merely a symbolic figure of death. The Pied part of his title refers to the fact that the Piper wore multicolored clothing, and as the seemingly innocent player of an instrument, it is possible that he is merely the figure of death, gently dancing the children of Hamelin off to their demise. It is important to note that the image of the dance of death was a common medieval trope. At the same instance, were the children's deaths entirely due to natural causes? Some of these suggested scenarios include theories that they drowned in the nearby river, were killed in a landslide, or even contracted some disease during an epidemic. Certainly the image of the rat, the infamous carrier of diseases, present in later versions of the story would lead us to think that the last scenario was certainly a viable one. But there are other, more modern interpretations which suggest that the children of Hamelin were in fact lured away by a pagan or heretic sect to forests nearby for ritual dancing, only to perish during a landslide or a collapsing sinkhole, a punishment of sorts from God. And others yet have posited the notion that the children left Hamelin to be part of a pilgrimage or a military campaign, never to return. This leads me to discuss another popular theory known as the immigration one. This is based on the idea that by the 13th century, the area was overpopulated, with only the oldest son being able to own all the land and power inherited from his parents, leaving the rest as serfs. Some historians would suggest that the children departed these lands to populate and colonize areas of Eastern Europe, such as Transylvania or Poland. While there are documents to support this theory, a darker yet conceivable occurrence was that the children were sold to a slave recruiter from the Baltic region of Eastern Europe, thereby explaining the lack of detailed records of the event in the town chronicles. With all that said, the fact of the matter is that there are so many diverse theories out there seeking to explain the behavior of the Pied Piper in Hamelin. Some are as simple as the ones I mentioned so far, and some go as far as to claim that the Pied Piper was a psychopathic pedophile who was responsible for stealing away the 100-plus children from Hamelin. Moreover, there are so many versions of the story now that some even have, oddly or not, happy endings to the tale, and certainly it might be preferable to pretend that the children were greeted with a more pleasant outcome than with what we are told.
Now it's your turn to make up your mind. Do you think the Pied Piper was a real figure or merely a symbol of specific historical trends or disasters in Germany? I, for one, don't think that the Hamelin rats were necessarily to blame for this individual making his way to the city, and if anything, I hope we can absolve them from at least part of the blame. Of course, if you are looking for your own pet rat in the Toronto area, you can head on over to Rat Emporium Toronto and get your own furry friend. Anyway, folks, I think I will end this video at that. Please don't hesitate to like this video if you enjoyed and subscribe if you wanted to hear more about legends and myths from around the world. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.